Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. I'm your host, James Gardner, certified athletic therapist, certified strength and conditioning specialist, yoga instructor, human being. This platform, for the pros, by the pros, anybody in the performance space, and beyond. Welcome here to share in the stories of professionals, experiences, journeys, learning along the way. It's a platform to connect, to network, and to be a part of a community that cares, with conversations that matter, experiences that resonate, and generate ideas, thought-provoking, organic dialogue, passionate pros. Brought to you as always by First Star Therapy, Mobility Tape, Epic, and Benchmark Athletics. In association with the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association. It's First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Thanks for being here. Thank you for being a part of it.
Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy roundtable brought to you by First Star Therapy. I'm your host, James Gardner, and this is a platform for the pros, by the pros. Passionate pros, organic dialogue. Let's chat. Thanks for listening. Let's roll.
Away we go. Session 60. First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy roundtable brought to you by First Star Therapy and Mobility Tape, our primary sponsor, the only heat-activated kinesiology tape on the market. Also brought to you in association with the Canadian Athletic Therapy Association. Tonight's guest is Mike Frostad of the Atlanta Braves. And before we get to his intro, I just want to thank everybody for being here. Thank everybody for picking up the podcast. All of you that are here live, all of you that are picking up the YouTube channel and the podcast. The conversations seem to be making their way into lots of different places across the globe and making an impact. So this is where it actually began. And this is part 1 of 4 of our Tommy John education series. No better guy to lead it off than our very first ever guest. This is 10 and a half months now. Mike was on as our first guest on Let's Chat. It initially began as a simple Zoom conversation, and it's grown and has continued to gain some momentum here. So we'll be looking at UCL injury, reconstruction, and rehab. Again, 10 and a half months ago, Mike was on. He was on in quarantine at the other end, leaving spring training and getting back to Canada. He's now entering spring training and in quarantine on that end as well, or just exiting quarantine. First ever guest, a mentor, a colleague, a friend, and Mike Frostad. Session 60. He's entering his 4th season as the assistant athletic trainer with the Atlanta Braves and his 26th season overall in professional baseball. He spent 22 seasons with the Toronto Blue Jays, 6 of them as the Major League assistant athletic trainer. He's a Calgary native and earned his undergrad degree from the University of Calgary, certified by both the NATA in the US and the CATA in Canada. He started his baseball career way back in 1996 with the St. Catharines Stompers in Short A. And made stops along the way in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Hagerstown, Maryland, and Dunedin, Florida. Mike was named to the position of minor league medical coordinator in 2005, a position he held until the 2010 season when he was appointed to Toronto as the assistant athletic trainer. He returned to the role of medical coordinator in 2011 and 2012 before returning back to the big leagues. In 2004 and 5, he won the Athletic Trainer of the Year award in the Florida State League. In 2005, he was also the recipient of the Minor League Athletic Trainer of the Year award. During the offseason, Mike resides in Redcliffe, Alberta with his wife, Candace. Honored to have you on, man. Appreciate you coming back. It means it wasn't terrible the first time through, or it was, and you want to improve on it. So let's fly, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always a good time. Appreciate it.
Awesome. And Mike is on. He's down in the Florida area getting ready for spring training with the Braves. Obviously, lots to consider, lots of things being considered by Major League Baseball as we get ready for hopefully an on-time spring training and on-time season. We're not going to go down that road. We're going to go down a different road. We're going to go down UCL reconstruction, from diagnosis to procedure to rehab with Mike this evening. And Frosty, UCL injury, as we know it in baseball, obviously fairly common to throwers. The valgus torque, when we go local to the elbow, anywhere sort of the average, I think in one of Glenn Fleisig's study, who does a lot of this work down at ASMI, 64 Newton meters of force, like going through the UCL when you're at maximum cocking phase, like that's a lot of force going through one little ligament. So you and I have talked about this at length, both when we were working together and then a little bit in our conversations leading up to this. But to talk to us a little bit about maybe the tissues, the structures involved, and then I'll sort of guide you, or we can work together through this thing in terms of diagnosis of an injury when it happens, and then we can go through procedure and rehab as you see fit.
Yeah. So obviously the UCL ligament on the medial side of the elbow, ulnar collateral ligament, made up of 3 bands: anterior, posterior, transverse bands. Anterior band is generally the one that gets injured in the throwing athlete, whether it's baseball, javelin, racket sports. See this injury. It's not just a baseball injury, but obviously that's the one that gets the press, the sexy sport, I guess. But yeah, you talked about the average amount of torque on the elbow and 64 Newton meters, and the UCL by itself doesn't withstand that much force. So when you're at maximum external rotation, 64 Newton meters on your elbow, and the UCL should fail at around 34 Newton meters. So what's holding the elbow together? If it should blow out every time you throw a baseball, you've got to have some other structures there that are helping to stabilize that medial elbow. And we're talking about the flexor pronator muscle mass, common flexor tendon. And that's why when people get a UCL injury, it's not usually just a UCL injury. There was something that started along that before the injury to the UCL, and that was usually they had some tendonitis or some weakness in that flexor pronator, and it just wasn't able to stabilize the elbow the way that it should have, and you end up with that deficient ligament in the elbow. One of the other things that you find a lot of times when you get into this type of injury is they'll develop an osteophyte in the posteromedial elbow. And that's because you get that little bit of gapping going on. You get that bone on bone in the back of the elbow. And now you've got a little bit of hypertrophy on that posterior olecranon, and you get that bone spur developed. So guys will lose their range of motion. They don't have full extension anymore. So these are all kind of precursors, and they're sort of like the red flags that you look for when an athlete, a pitcher specifically, is going to end up going down the road of having a UCL injury and possibly Tommy John.
Yeah, I think these are, landmarks and things like that for everybody who's familiar with the anatomy. For those that aren't, I mean, it's a pretty cool thing to look at. You can just Google UCL injuries, and it'll show you the 3 bands. It'll show you where the olecranon is on the back side of the elbow, the medial elbow, that little bone on the inside of the elbow, that common flexor pronator mass where it originates or ends, whatever terminology everybody's using these days in anatomy, where all those tendons come together that are responsible for a whole lot of things that go on in the hand and wrist and elbow. Obvious site of injury. Now we're going to microscopically, I guess, look at the elbow specifically when we're talking UCL, but both you and I acknowledge that this is a full body look when we're looking at UCL injuries, right? Like how the ankle functions, how the hip functions, how lumbopelvic function has a play, what extension looks like in the thoracic spine, internal, external rotation of the shoulder. Like this is not an elbow problem, right? And we're going to specify to the elbow, because we could spend weeks probably breaking down a throwing mechanism to show just all the contributions to an elbow. But just for for education's sake and context, like when we're talking elbow and breaking down of this tissue, we're not talking that this is happening on its own or because of just that local site. So that's just a little caveat from what Frosty said, and to let everybody else sort of let that marinate. When we look at the throwing motion, we look at it in a 6-stage process, at least in a textbook, we look at it that way. And the phases that really affect that UCL specific: late cocking, right, Frosty, like maximum external rotation, and then that
acceleration.
Yeah, and then the accelerative phase. So we'll definitely get into that. But let's jump ship here for a second, and let me welcome you again, and thank you for your time. A, it's a second time around. B, it's Valentine's Day, so it's like happy Valentine's Day. I know we're talking about something that we both love, so we might as well just cherish that little bit of it too. Not the injury side, but baseball and the experience of throwing, and just how much time you have spent with it. It's amazing to hear from you and to give your time. So thank you again. And if you don't mind, can we shift to diagnosis? So like if and when somebody, what are the typical signs when somebody blows or tears a UCL that you've experienced with throwers along the way?
Yeah. So one of the key points to remember is it's not very often where it's a single pitch that causes this to happen. Like you don't have the guy that has that one throw and he feels the pop in his elbow. Mm-hmm. Majority of the times it's probably just an overuse type injury, and they start feeling like some tightness in their elbow, medial elbow. They start feeling fatigued in their flexor pronator mass, and they may have lost a little bit of velocity. They may have lost a little bit of command. Those are kind of two of the key points as well. Loss of velocity, loss of command. Those are things that are going to be red flags for you as well, that something bad could be coming. Those guys that do have that single instance where they feel that pop and it's like instant pain, those are the guys when they throw that pitch and the ball ends up at the backstop because it went 14 feet behind the hitter. Mm-hmm. So not very often, but it does happen. And with that, it's really, you get your hands on these guys and you get them out of the game, you get your hands on them, and sometimes they'll get a little bit of numbness down into their pinky and their ring finger. They've got that ulnar nerve distribution going on. Maybe a little bit of laxity on exam. If they've completely blown out, you'll probably get a little bit of laxity. But if they've just had like a chronic injury to the UCL, then there's probably still some stability there. And really, you're going to have to end up most likely doing either an ultrasound on the elbow or an MRI on it to really confirm everything. And, some of these surgeons now, and rightfully so, they're reconstructing guys that don't have full thickness tears, but they've been beat up so badly, chronic degeneration of the ligament, that they just can't function without having something done. And so they have to undergo that MRI and probably undergo the surgery to get it done. So, it's a long road, even just to get diagnosis sometimes.
Yeah, it's not quite as straightforward as it looks in the media. Like these are things that are managed along the way. I've had opportunities to speak with you and a number of work with a number of baseball people, and we see it from the outside, like now stepping away from baseball and how it's presented is like, oh, they blew out their UCL like last night. But really you're managing sort of or countering or trying to deter this UCL damage basically every day when somebody's throwing, because of what you talked about, at least max velocity throwers, right? Like it's an uphill battle. You're battling anatomy that's not meant to sustain the load that it's taking.
Yeah. And now, you're back in the day, 20 years ago, a guy threw 94, 95, and it was like, wow, this guy is like throwing really hard. And now you don't find a guy in a bullpen that throws under that.
Right.
And you guys are maxing out there's guys throwing over 100 miles an hour now. And really the trend that we're seeing is the guys that throw harder are the ones that are ending up with the surgery. It's kind of a shift in the paradigm in that it used to be the breaking balls and sliders and split fingers were the things that were causing this injury to happen, but they're really kind of backtracking on that. And now it's the guys that are throwing 99, 100 miles an hour because of the extra amount of torque that's being placed on the elbow. Those are the guys that are blowing out.
Yeah, and there's some interesting stats. There was an AJSM article, American Journal of Sports Medicine, I think in 2015, or at least published with 2015 data showing that the greatest number of procedures was actually in the 15 to 19-year-old age group, and that was climbing by 6% annually. Like that's a thing that is scary, scary, scary stuff. And if you've heard Dr. Andrews and Glenn Fleissig and all these other things, like I don't want you to infer anything because you're dealing with Major League Baseball players, the majority of what you do, and some minor league guys who are coming into the big leagues. But do you feel like maybe that sports specialization piece, or like throwing so much at an early age? Because the guys that are throwing 100 are typically the guys that have been throwing, they've been high velo for a long, long time. They've been high velo since they were 13, 14, 15. Then they get exposed in tournaments on weekends and then showcases and then, collegiate camps or scouting bureaus or whatever. Is that a reach on my part? Or would you say like that may be very much accurate?
Not at all. You bring up a great point. We actually hosted a conference in Calgary last winter, and that was kind of our focus, is sports specialization in youth athletes and how detrimental it actually is to their overall development as a true athlete. And it's more often than not that the people the kids that are playing hockey or playing baseball as a year-round sport, they're actually the ones that get burned out, get injured, and don't ever make it, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Sports specialization is huge. And I think the more sports that kids can play growing up, the better off they're going to be, and more well-rounded athletes they will be as well.
Yeah, and I think just to veer off on that one, like that's a point that I think we all need to understand. Most people are not working in Major League Baseball, but to hear it from the top and allow that to trickle down, this makes a ton of sense, and hopefully continues to make impact. I'm not sure what year it was, but I think we're somewhere in the 25 to 33% of all Major League pitchers of having had Tommy John at this point, right? Is that still fairly accurate?
Yeah, I think it's around 25%. I kind of saw those numbers as well, and yeah, it's right around a quarter.
Yeah, which is, I mean, shocking. And then you start getting into sort of second surgery, but it's not that shocking when you work in it, because you understand like this is trauma at a micro level that is not very micro when you're talking about max velo. It's happening on a regular basis and eroding sort of that ligament like you've talked about already. So, okay, so you've talked about, loss of velo, loss of command, a little bit of decrease in extension, not necessarily that pop, and there it goes. In my experience with back in the day in the Blue Jays, we had a guy, and you were in the office, a guy came in and he's like, I just felt a pop in my elbow. Like, did you throw? And he was like, no, I was just doing the zipper up on my jeans. Right. And so that was one, I don't know if you recall it, but that was one we were just kind of shocked, but not maxing out on the mound, at least that day, but just one funny little tweak at the end and maybe just popped it over that end. The other time, he actually went on to play and have the surgery in the minor leagues, blew out a second time and actually showed that ball reaching the backstop 14 feet behind the batter, right? Like he was a guy who did it in two very distinct ways when he did the first time and the second time. So it happens those ways, but definitely not all the time. So you touched on things that you're looking for and sort of directing from the therapy standpoint, the training standpoint. Diagnosis, when you get your hands on, you're looking at what, like a valgus stress test? What other things are? Yeah.
So we're doing a valgus stress test. That's the big thing. We'll do a Tinel's test, check the nerve, see if that flared up at all, where you get the zinging down into your pinky and ring fingers. There's the moving valgus stress test, which is kind of like a milking maneuver, where you get them into full external rotation of their shoulder and really put that stress back down on the medial side of the elbow. And then you can flex and extend them at the elbow, and you get a good indication from that one as well. But those are obviously the main tests that you can do for this. And then, you'll run x-rays just to see if there's any bony changes. A lot of times you'll see that spur in the back, maybe a kissing lesion, and potentially even see an avulsion. So sometimes the ligament does pop right off.
Yeah, and you always have to look at flexor pronator and take those things seriously, obviously, even if the UCL checks out with some of those tests. But then again, it's also sometimes very non-distinct in terms of how it presents. So great stuff in terms of looking at the test specifically. Once you see an athlete with a potential UCL, you have a network of people. You have a doctor, an orthopedic surgeon, a team doctor. You get the imaging done, and then where does that process go in baseball, in Major League Baseball, minor league baseball? How does that look in terms of prior to the procedure happening?
Yeah, so a lot of times, the minor league players don't have as many rights as the major league players do because they're not protected by the union. But as a rule, your home team, your general orthopedic surgeon is going to take a look at them. They usually have a specialization in shoulder and elbow, and they'll take a look at them and make the determination. It's become commonplace now to get a second opinion, sometimes a third opinion. There are some gurus throughout the United States. There's a couple in Canada that I know of, and the big thing is to get that second opinion, and rightfully so. These are the doctors that are being called upon because they're the ones that do the most surgical repairs, and they have the most skill at doing the surgeries. Not saying that the other guys couldn't handle it, but when you're talking about your career, you want the best. And so guys are going to the Dr. Anders in Pensacola. They're going to Dr. Altchek in New York. They're going to see Dr. Elatrosh in LA. So there's guys spread out all over the country that are very well versed in the Tommy John surgery and open to trying new procedures as well, which I think we'll touch on in a little bit as well.
Yeah. Just to backpedal a minute, we know that this is sort of, pandemic is not the word we can use anymore when we're talking, I don't think, about UCLs, but they have used that prior to COVID. I don't mean to make light of the scenario, but this is something that's affecting a lot of throwers, has affected a lot of throwers. In terms of prep now, I've sort of switched gears through my career and then looked at like, okay, here's the protocol after surgery. So is there maybe a little shift, or has it always been the case that you take that protocol and like plug it into throwers before they have the surgery, so that, or before they even get injured? Is that sort of like the state of mind, or like what are the things that you're looking at with the training staff and strength and conditioning to say like Tommy John's a real thing that we're going to face? What are we doing to counteract it?
So before they're injured, I mean, they pretty much all the pitchers have their own routine, right? And we're there to support them in that. We'll give them suggestions. We'll give recommendations, just, try and support them as best they can. A lot of it comes down to the shoulder maintenance as well, because it is all interconnected. And the more that we can control that aspect of their game, then, they have a chance to stay healthy, I guess is the best way to put it. Yeah. I feel like we've done a pretty good job over the last several years where we don't really have too many guys that are blowing out. We try and do some risk assessments on guys before we sign them and make sure we're not getting damaged goods to start with. But, as far as taking a guy that's come up through the organization, let's say, they start, when they first get to the team, they're given an arm care maintenance program that they're required to follow, really, and we're really hoping to avoid situations like a Tommy John surgery.
Yeah, no, beautiful. I think all of these things make a ton of sense, and I think for when we go, just stepping back again, and eventually we'll move forward, but stepping back again to sort of that specialization, like baseball is one of those sports where specialization is I mean, it's a thing. Like we have 14-year-olds playing major league seasons, essentially. We have kids starting at 12 and 13 throwing indoors in October because Major League Baseball pitchers are throwing indoors in October. I think looking at it, and you tell me, you can do a lot of things to get better at throwing a baseball without throwing a baseball, right?
No question.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. Fact, point. That's it. Just wanted to lay that out there. I'm not the only one saying this. I just think that's really, really important for anybody in the sport world to understand. We do not need to do the thing that we do to get better at doing that thing, especially when it comes to throwing in the high velocity at the UCL. Okay. So you diagnose, you have a working diagnosis, you get some imaging, you work with your medical staff. They decide, okay, the option here is second opinion, third opinion, whatever the case may be, but it's a surgical surgical intervention. This is a UCL and ulnar collateral ligament reconstruction is typically what's done. Let's start with the reconstruction, and if you can, sort of lame person's term it in terms of what the procedure actually looks like, and then we can go down whatever rabbit hole you wish.
Yeah. So just even before we get to the surgery, I just want to touch on the fact that sometimes there is enough damage there to warrant the surgery, but the player doesn't want it. And you can't force a guy to have that surgery done if they don't want it. It's their body. They can choose what they do with it. You could have 2 or 3 doctors all recommend it, but that player wants to try and rehab. And so we give it our best effort. Sometimes there's PRP injections involved. Stem cell is a big thing now, obviously. And guys are getting better, but a lot of times they are the ones that fail as well. So, you do end up on the operating table, unfortunately, and you're having a Tommy John reconstruction. So basically that procedure, they're going to harvest a tendon from your body, whether it's the palmaris longus tendon in your wrist. Not everybody has a palmaris longus tendon. So they'll take a gracilis tendon out of your hamstring, your leg, and they'll use that instead. And basically what they're doing is they're going to wrap that tendon around in a figure 8 fashion. There's a couple different techniques. There's a docking procedure as well, which is found to be very successful. But that figure 8 fashion, and you're just trying to reconstruct that ligament, give the elbow some stability on the medial side. And now you're asking a ligament to become a tendon to become a ligament. So that's part of the length of the recovery, is allowing for that transformation to take place. So they'll make an incision on the medial side of the elbow about 6 inches long. And basically they'll open up, they'll dissect down through that flexor mass right down to the medial epicondyle and down onto the ulna where you've got the sublime tubercle. Those are your 2 attachments of the ligament. And they'll basically take a look at it and just kind of reconstruct from there. So they're making drill holes into the bone itself and doing that figure 8 pattern and trying to reconstruct that ligament as best as possible.
Right. And not although done regularly now, not a necessarily straightforward, right? You have to go through tendon, you have to get, splay the musculature to get down and find that in certain cases. The ulnar nerve is involved as well, where they may or may not have to transpose that nerve, move that nerve so that it's not flipping, right? So that it has adequate chance to do what it needs to do as well. So lots of considerations, although fairly straightforward at this point in time, since being fairly common in the baseball space. So surgery goes well, and your thrower comes out. Your throwers come out of the surgery, and they begin their rehab, right? So the timing has shifted. If we looked at it now versus 5 years ago or 10 years ago, how has the timeline changed in baseball, pro baseball?
I think most teams are being a little bit more conservative in their rehab on the Tommy Johns. I remember, we were rehabbing some guys and getting them back in 11 months to Major League Baseball games, and the expected timeline is around then it was 11 to 12. So we shaved a couple months off, but now you're looking at least 12 months to 14 and sometimes even closer to 16 months of rehab in order for guys to be able to get back to their previous level of competition. So, you come out of that surgery and you're in a splint for a couple of weeks and you just got to start some range of motion. And, you don't pick up a ball now. It used to be you would pick up a ball and start throwing at 16 weeks and that was it, you start. And now you're looking at 20 to 24 weeks. I think we're starting guys at 20 weeks, and if it's a second surgery, we're usually waiting until 24 before we even let them pick up a ball and start throwing.
I think that personalized care, right? Like looking at it as each individual, follow a protocol to a certain point, but obviously push it if you need to, and not try to ramp it up too quickly, knowing all that you know about what's gone into this and what leads to the surgery in the first place, right?
Yeah, and we're fortunate in that, a lot of times we're able to even go in the surgical suite and watch this procedure happen. And a lot of therapists out there, they're getting them just cold, like here's what I had done. I need you to rehab me, and and you don't really get that care and attention from the surgeon. And obviously we benefit from that because we have that direct communication with the surgeon. We may have actually seen what went on, but knowing the exact procedure and what the expectations are coming out of it is very important when you're going through the rehab of this injury.
Yeah, I think this is one that doesn't get enough credit in the big league space, in the pro space, where you have that direct communication with the surgeon. You can talk about what the tissue looked like, or even see it if you're in there for the surgery, or get the USB or the recording of the surgery, whatever the case might be. If you don't have access, and I know you're not really familiar with this space because you do have access, but what would you say if you're not familiar with the procedure? Is it a critical part of rehab to understand the actual procedure from a rehab standpoint?
It's not, but I think it kind of guides you initially as to how aggressive you can be. So if you don't have that line of communication, you're probably going to want to err on the side of caution and take your time. Don't try and push things and set world records for getting somebody back from a Tommy John. And I think you really want to just kind of take your time with it and err on the side of caution the entire way through the whole rehab.
Yep, beautiful. So when you look at the rehab, do you break this thing down into sort of like month-long chunks? You're dealing with throwers who are chomping at the bit as soon as they get out of surgery, to get moving, to get throwing, to get back to what they want to do. Education goes a long way, right? And talking with the athlete about, here are the do's and the don'ts of this thing. But where do you go from, they get out, they're in with you on a daily basis? Like, do you have time points or timelines? Like, here's where we want to be at by 1 month, by 3 months, by 6 months. How does that look in terms of a general schedule?
You kind of do, but you also have to remember that setting deadlines like that can also be detrimental.
Mm-hmm.
And you really should focus your rehab on goal-oriented rehab. So once you achieve this amount of range of motion, then we can do this activity on top of it. And I think that's kind of where things have shifted as well, is that, it used to be, well, you're at 16 weeks, so it's time to start throwing, but they may not have full range of motion at 16 weeks.
Right.
And so now you're adding throwing onto an elbow that doesn't have full range, which is not going to work out very well. Quite honest. So the more you make it a goal-oriented rehab, the better your results will end up being as well.
Yeah, nice. I think that's great, and just moving as you can, right through it and to it. Yeah, so we look at reconstruction, and this is the figure 8 or the docking procedure where the drill holes and taking palmaris longus again. Like, I don't know, I recall loosely somewhere in the 10 to 15% of the population doesn't have the palmaris longus tendon. So then they can harvest it from somewhere else, right? An extensor, a hamstring tendon or something like that. Is that the common if no palmaris longus is available?
Yeah, it's usually the gracilis tendon, which is generally a little bit bigger diameter than the palmaris. They've really haven't determined that bigger is better in that situation. I think what you really want to do is try and get more wraps of the ligament or the tendon itself. So, if you can only get 2 wraps of a gracilis because you can't get it to fit through the drill holes anymore, then, maybe a palmaris tendon, if you had it, would have been the better option. But if you don't have that option, then you go to the gracilis.
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. So that's the reconstruction, and that is exactly what it sounds like, making the tendon over, or making the ligament over again out of tendon. You mentioned, and it was sort of maybe the second or third time that I had heard of it, but a resection or a revision of the UCL is an alternative that some surgeons are now working with. Is that the right term? You can.
No, they're actually doing a primary repair.
Okay.
So there are only specific types of injuries that are candidates for the primary repair, and MRI will guide you as to how beat up the ligament is. But sometimes, if it's a proximal or a distal injury to the ligament and not mid-substance, then there's a chance that they can repair it instead of reconstructing it. And many times what will happen with that surgery is the surgeon will tell the patient ahead of time, look, we're going to try and do a primary repair, but once I get in your elbow and I take a look at the ligament, if it's too beat up, then we're going to have to do the reconstruction. So MRI is great, but you can't always tell until you actually get in the elbow. But yeah, if you have a proximal or distal tear, whether it's full or partial, they're actually using a fiber tape. So they call it an internal brace, and it's a collagen tape. And what they're doing with that is they're actually repairing the ligament back down, and the collagen tape allows the ligament to heal itself rather than having to reconstruct. And they've really cut down the healing time of the surgery. It's, instead of it being a 12 or 14 or 16 months, people are able to get back in 6 months and to competitive baseball. So their downtime is significantly different. And part of that is due to the fact that they're not drilling through the bone. And so that bone does not have to heal anymore. You don't have to give the tendon time to kind of transform into a ligament and function as a ligament. And so you've really been able to cut down the amount of time that takes. So you're looking at about a 6-month recovery on that. And, that's pretty eye-opening when you think that, that's half the time of what it used to be. And when it's somebody's career on the line, that's really enticing if somebody can do that.
Yeah. And obviously it takes, again, coming back around to finding the experts, finding the second opinion, so that maybe if I have to wait an extra 6 months, that's not good for my career as the thrower, right? So the second and third opinion, as you mentioned, warranted. And if it is your career, you want to get in the hands of somebody who has seen these things before and can make that decision based off of that. So again, to highlight that, if that's going to happen, a primary repair, that is only certain elements of the injury, right? This is not all UCLs can be repaired this way.
Yeah, no, it's usually like the chronic injuries where, the elbow's been bugging you for 2 months, and then you end up with, just this kind of stretched out ligament where it's degenerative in the middle, and it's kind of, you get a chance to look at it and it's kind of turning yellow because it's scarring and, previous injury. Those are the ones that do not do well with the primary repair, and they have to go with the reconstruction. But if you've got a distal, like say right at the sublime tubercle where it attaches, if it's kind of peeled away right there, then that's one that you could try and do the primary repair on and have some success with it.
Yeah, amazing stuff in terms of advancements and sort of understanding of the injury as we get sort of. I think the first one was, am I right? 70, I don't know, anyway, 70 something, anyway, something like this. I always get mixed up with like Tommy John stats and the first repair by Frank Jobe. So anyway, we won't go down that road. I can't recall it off the top of my head unless you can. So in your career, 26 years in professional baseball, like this is the thing. How many Tommy Johns would you guess you've been a part of in terms of rehabbing, or advising or evaluating through those 26 years, or moving in?
The first 10 years as a minor league trainer, I probably didn't get too many because, anybody that got hurt, it was just kind of like you send them down to Florida and then they take care of them down there, and you sort of lose track of them. But I've probably personally rehabbed at least a dozen, I would say, or had a part in rehabbing a dozen of them. There was one year where we had 4 at one time, and that was a bad year. So as the rehab coordinator, they sent 4 guys down from the big leagues. A couple of them went in for surgery into the same day, and it wasn't too much after that we had 2 more going. And so I'd say probably I've been a part of or rehabbed about 12.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, you're there long enough, you're going to see them. And just to come back to that 4 in a very short time span, like that's where it becomes really, really tricky not to like, okay, guy A, guy B, guy C, and guy D, you're all on program rehab here, and to start parsing out where those guys are at and sort of eliminating the competition as well, which I think we may have had some overlap at some point with some guys going through some surgeries, and there was always that little bit of, well, why does he get to do that, or why does he get to do that? But trying to hone guys in on where they're at and getting the most out of their rehab, right?
Yeah, and that's where the goal-oriented rehab comes in, and guys hit goals at different times.
Yeah. So. Yeah, no, beautiful stuff. A throwing program goes from the time they throw. Is this for anybody who's not familiar? What does this look like in terms of like general terms? Like, am I just coming out of surgery, doing some rehab, and then throwing off the mound? Or is there a progression? What does that progression look like? And you don't have to speak to specifics at all in terms of like what Atlanta's looks like versus what Toronto's did or what Baltimore's doing or anything like that. But are there general principles like we're going to move up distance or intensity? How does that look?
Yeah, so generally you're going to start off just doing some plyometrics without even picking up a baseball. You're going to do some plyometric drills to kind of get your arm used to the stresses that it's going to undergo when you do start throwing. But some teams will start at 30 feet, some will start at 45 feet, and you just kind of build up. You sort of have to build up intensity and volume all at the same time. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. But the more throwing programs you're a part of, you kind of learn how to make those adjustments, and you can judge that when you back up in distance, you decrease the number of throws. So your volume goes down as your intensity goes up until you can build back up to the where you need to be in order to make that next step back. But we kind of always have done a 15-foot increments, back to 45 feet, 60 feet, 75, kind of get somebody back out to the distance that they're comfortable throwing with. Some people like to go all the way out to 180 feet. Some like to go to 240. Other guys don't throw that far. So why would you make them throw that far in their rehab if that's not how far they actually throw when they're healthy and playing the game? So we like to take that into consideration when we're designing a throwing program, is right. What's normal for you. And we'll take that and we'll look at it and we'll kind of build out the throwing program. And, it's a 2 to 3 month flat ground progression before you can even get up on a mound. So you're just throwing flat ground to a partner that's 75 feet, 90 feet away. Once you get built up to your full long toss distance, then we kind of shorten you up and have you throw down to somebody that's in a squat position just on flat ground. We call it a flat ground program. And then once you've completed all of that, then you start to get to that mound progression. And again, it's sort of, where do you start with the mound progression? You can't just jump in and start throwing full speed. You kind of have to taper it off a little bit, get used to throwing downhill, because the forces on the shoulder and the forces on the elbow do go up as you get on the mound, and you have to start throwing downhill. So again, a balancing act in the bullpen when you're up on the mound. But, generally you'll start out with throwing just a regular fastball and, get comfortable with that for multiple times before you start adding in different pitches. Some guys have a curveball, slider, splitter, whatever the case may be. You get their changeup throwing in there, and the mound progression itself is another 2 months before you can start seeing hitters. So there's a whole progression. Like, you don't just pick up a ball and decide that you're going to start pitching in a game again. It's a many months long process, like 5, 6, 7 months long before you're back to game activity just from throwing.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously crucial to understand, and to go to somebody who understands that kind of progression. It's also the art of it as well, right? There's some science to it, but there's certainly like some art to sort of navigating that and utilizing the pitching coaches and everybody that you have in place to sort of help with that. How much variability has there been in your experience, or has there been with guys just in terms of comfortability? Like, some guys will, the first time they pick up a ball, they'll be like, oh, there we go. Yep, got it back. And then other guys will struggle to really find, like, I don't really remember what to do. How does that vary, or has that varied in your experience?
Sorry, could you run through that again?
Yeah, just in terms of the first time when guys are done on their, post-op, and they've done their rehab, they're going to start their throwing progression. Is there been a lot of variability from guy to guy that you've experienced working with, just in terms of finding the quote unquote the feel, right? Like, some guys will get it right away and other guys will drag a little bit.
Yeah, some guys are real hesitant to get started. And I think those are the ones that have had long-standing medial elbow pain, not the guys that just blew out in one shot, but they kind of get hesitant to start throwing again. And you'll see it in their mechanics. They're not free and easy. They're guarded. They're trying to protect themselves, and you can't throw that way. So There's many different aspects that can go along with this, and we'll try and get a sports performance guy involved with it, and somebody that can help with the mental aspect of the game. See what they can do to kind of overcome those fears. But it will vary from guy to guy. There's some guys that have that mental toughness and other guys that just don't.
Yeah.
So
we've seen it a lot. I don't want to compare injuries, but we've seen it a lot in concussions and concussion patients, is that, the long-standing issues with concussion may or may not sort of be similar to the long-standing issues with the medial elbow pain, is that it's almost like it's been so long since you felt normal that like you're almost seeking out like that discomfort, right? And it becomes a tricky battle, right, in the rehab space to really work through all these components. So great shares. And obviously the shoulder programming and working with guys as they get back to throwing. How much dialogue is there in terms of training staff, S&C, pitching coach, manager, like that's a whole, everybody talks on this? Or is it sort of, you guys do your part and then hand it off? How does that look? And I just want to play on sort of like the interplay, and some people may not be familiar with how it looks on that side.
Yeah. So I think, obviously the management is always informed of what's going on. Up until the point when they're just doing their rehab and not throwing, the pitching coaches are usually just like, you guys do your stuff, let me know when he's ready to pick up a ball, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's there's definitely going to be some interaction once we get to that throwing program stage. A lot of pitching coaches like to be involved in the development of the throwing program, and we like to involve them as well because their knowledge is invaluable. They know the mechanical part of it, whereas the biomechanics of pitching that's their baby, and we kind of let them run with it. We don't want to step on toes. Strength and conditioning, we're working hand in hand. A lot of times they're going to do their programming for the lower half when they're doing their rehab, core lower half stuff, whereas all the upper body stuff is going to take place in the training room. So we do that mainly just to make sure that we've got that joint protected and they're not going to end up doing something in the weight room that is going to be detrimental to them. But definitely we're working hand in hand with strength coaches from the start of this all the way through the return to play.
Yeah, beautiful. I think it's just it's another piece that sometimes we don't see and a lot of people don't hear about unless they're in that space, that there's a whole lot of things that go into this rehab, and it's not as necessarily as straightforward as I'm going to get you from point A to point B, but we're going to have to do this together. Going back again, this seems to be the theme tonight, but just going back to sort of like that overuse and looking at the peds population or the pediatric population and overtraining. I just want to point this out because I see this now coming back here and watching and listening to what's going on in baseball, at least in sort of some of the immediate circles around here from the amateur space. And certain things aren't necessarily understood, but here's one that's really straightforward. The centers in the elbow are fairly straightforward in terms of how reliable they are, right, in ossifying and becoming to full maturity. The medial epicondyle is the last structure to fully mature in an elbow. And that doesn't happen, like it fuses between 14 and 16 years of age. So you're playing with a medial epicondyle that houses a UCL. It houses the flexor pronator mass, the ulnar nerve, and a bunch of other tissue that crosses over that and inserts in behind that in an elbow that's stressed beyond what it can tolerate. And we're asking kids between 14 and 16 to throw a baseball, lots of times through the fall and winter, even outside of season. So that's the logic in my head that says, listen, like we have to rely on the science. We have to find other ways to train that's not stressing this joint that hasn't even fully fused yet.
Yeah, and that's why there's pitch counts now in Little League, and just right around there, Dr. Andrews was a very big proponent of getting pitch counts put into Little League to protect them, because he was usually the one that would see these kids, and the parents would come in and they got their 14-year-old and 16-year-old and like, I want them to get Tommy John. I want them to throw harder. And these are all just things that are not true. Like, you don't get Tommy John surgery to throw harder.
Right.
It's not a fun procedure. It's painful. I don't know anybody that would want to put their 14, 15, 16-year-old kid through that rehab, the surgery and the rehab, because they think they're going to throw harder, and unfortunately there is little leaguer's elbow, which is basically what you're talking about. And that sometimes that medial epicondyle just doesn't fuse together, and you end up with what they call little leaguer's elbow. And some can get through it and some can't. And, it's not necessarily one that you're going to go in and fix, but it's a whole different procedure than a Tommy John. But if you do have to fix it, but they can come back from that a little bit easier. But Tommy John isn't the answer if your kid has medial elbow pain, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think throwing a baseball through the fall and winter is either. But I'll save my opinion for another day when we jump down that road and really want to hash it out. But MLB Pitch Smart is the program that Dr. Andrews and Major League Baseball aligned on to get that into amateur baseball. And it's an amazing program. It really does. It takes the athlete first approach, the amateur athlete, and really puts a stopgap in there. And then we rely on amateur coaches to really follow those rules and not try to bend them to make them work, right? But yeah, that medial elbow and little leaguer's elbow and these kinds of things, nothing that you deal with typically. Again, you're working with those high-end guys that have gotten through that. They've been built up. They're built up to a certain point, and you're about ready to go, hopefully, with spring training there. The Braves have a new facility as of last year that you got to experience for a day or two, at least last year, hopefully longer. Yeah. So where is the facility where you are now, and how does it look for spring training? Not in terms of a prediction, but in terms of the facility itself. The Braves obviously moved and have a nice one now. So what are the upgrades? What do things look like?
Yeah, no, we used to be housed in at Disney World in Orlando. And it was just kind of a older stadium, and we had to rent the fields from them and things like that. And the group here with the Braves, they purchased some land down here in Florida. They call it Northport. It's kind of Venice. If anybody's familiar with the west coast of Florida, it's sort of right around the Sarasota, Bradenton area, a little bit south of that, and kind of halfway in between Sarasota and Fort Myers is basically the best way to put it. So great facility here. They did a wonderful job. We have 6 fields that are dedicated to us. We have 2 half fields. We have a humongous area for the guys to stretch outside. They've actually built an academy, so the minor league players during spring training can stay there.
Oh, wow.
They don't have to get housing. They've got meal plans there. The cafeteria is great. The food is awesome. Like when I started, it used to be maybe a grilled cheese sandwich and a bowl of chicken noodle soup, and now we're getting I think I had some salmon with stuffed crab in it the other day, so it was kind of like, it's kind of a nice treat. But yeah, the facility is awesome. It's shared. It's a major league, minor league facility, so we do have both here. But we've got split training rooms. We share a wet room where we've got 2 in-ground cold plunge pools, 2 in-ground hot plunge pools. We have a HydroWorks with the treadmill in it. We've got 4 above ground stainless steel tubs, good training rooms on both sides, great weight room that's shared, just kind of split down the middle, and but mirrored on both sides. So it's the same on the major league side as it is the minor league side. And then you go upstairs from that and you got a cardio deck. So you've got all your bikes and treadmills and stuff up there. But yeah, wonderful facility. If it was daytime, I could point you out the window and you could see the inside the stadium. But
yeah, peeking behind you right now. Just I don't know if it's a reflection. Yeah, we'll do it in the daytime when you come back on the third time. Awesome, man. Well, they have a good guy in you. Obviously, an amazing staff there to reward them for all of the good things that they have built. And man, this has been amazing. I'll open this up for anybody. Just if you have a question, please type it into the chat box, and I'll get it over to Frosty here in these last couple minutes. But this is again session 60 of First Star Let's Chat and Athletic Therapy Roundtable, brought to you by Mobility Tape and in association with the Canadian Athletic Therapy Association. Session 60 already, man. You were on session 1, and it's been a ride. It's been great. Your insight, all of the comments that and your insight and experience, comments, and everything that you bring is amazing, man. I'm sure everybody feels the same. This has been terrific. We'll go again next Sunday with Brian Cheeseman, who's in the WHL with the Edmonton Oil Kings. Same time, same place. But Frosty, I'll wish you the best, man. Listen, it's not easy to be in your shoes. I know things are obviously constantly turning with COVID and trying to get back to spring training, and with a large roster and all the guys that need to come in and their staff that needs to come in and trying to navigate this. Wish you the best to stay healthy and for a good start. And on top of that, like, I'd love to see some baseball too. So from a selfish standpoint, like, just keep pushing and get a season out there in the safest way possible. Any final words on Tommy John or anything for anybody listening in here? We'll leave that to you to close this thing out.
Yeah, not really on Tommy John. I think we touched on everything that I had written down for notes, and just want to thank you for hosting this. I think this is a great, Zoom call that we have, and for those that were in attendance, and hopefully you got something out of it, and the podcast, is going strong from what I've seen. So kudos to you. Appreciate you doing this and getting the word out on some of this stuff to anybody that wants to join in. So I appreciate it, James.
Awesome. Mike, thank you very much. Session 60, First Star Let's Chat. Mike Frostad of the Atlanta Braves, part 1 of our 4-part Tommy John education series. We'll wish you good night.
All right, take care.
You too.
Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this community. Check us out online, firststartherapy.com. That's FIRSTAR therapy.com. Or email us with feedback, consult@firststartherapy.com, CONSULT@firststartherapy.com, on Instagram @firststar.therapy, and our podcast host @letschat.at. This is First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast.